welcome back. It's Christine again with the Artist Pod, and today we'll be talking about how text and font choice have emotion and how to sort of use the text tool in general in Photoshop. So let's get arting. Alright, so the text tool with Photoshop, right? So first of all, text tool right over here, you can click on this button, and that's what's going to give you the text. You have your font selection right up here, a lot of different options here. Depending on the font, you can change it to regular, you can change it to italicized or bold or different things like that. This is your size. You can change the color of the font right there to whatever you want. So pretty straightforward. I don't have to click on a new layer for font because when I do so, it's going to automatically do that. And then, you know, your font choices are particularly important. So text has emotion, right? Font has emotion. When you look at it, it sort of conjures different emotion, what we're thinking, as I mentioned earlier. Kind of like body language. You know, when we're talking, when we're giving a speech, when we're watching anybody talk, the thing we remember most is their body language, is how they were presented, right? Are they frustrated? Are they happy? Are they passionate? Are they angry? Are they bored? And we pick up on all these social cues because all of us are that little bit empathic where we use social cues to determine what someone's feeling. And we pick up on that. And our body language is how we determine that. So your font choice is kind of the same thing. That's the body language of writing. And depending on font, a particularly benign sentence can change its meaning significantly, right? If I just sort of throw out a phrase like, I'll see you when you get back. Very, very innocent statement. I'll see you when you get back. Depending on the font choice, can be radically different. It can be, you know, you can look at it and say, this is someone they're romantically involved with. Or this is a close friend, or a family member, or a boss, or a coworker, or an acquaintance. And if you have the wrong font, or the right font, depending on the emotion you're going for, it can look really creepy. And all of that is done through font. So as an example, right, if I click on here and I type that out, so let's say I'm going to type that out, which was, I'll see you when you get back, right? Very cursive-y font. And potentially, you know, that could be a potential lover. But what if we change it? Let's see if we type the same thing and I'll look for, and this is a nifty trick. If you're trying to see how font will look, you can click on this and just scroll down and you can see it changes without me having to click on it. So I'm just hovering over all of these and it's changing for me. But let's find one that is unique here. Oh, how about that one? Look at that. Right, this conjures something very different. It's definitely more medieval font. If I'm looking at this, I'm associating it with medieval or Renaissance. I'm associating it with a Gothic style. I'm associating it with potentially vampires or fantasy stories or things like that. So it can potentially conjure a very different image, even though it's the exact same phrase. So when you're thinking about font and you're thinking about font choices for what you're trying to indicate, whether it's for your brand, for your niche, right? Are you designing shirts? What message are you trying to convey? Is this for, you know, a nature niche? It should sort of conjure images of nature. It should look more earthy. Or if it's more formal, you know, maybe it's referencing, you know, literary works, things like that, then maybe it looks a little bit more formal. Maybe, you know, so just think about what you're doing. Is it motorcycles? Was it whatever your niche is? Think about the emotions that the font has. And I encourage you, especially in Photoshop, just to go through all the font options and think about what emotion they're trying to conjure. Now, having said all of that, you know, you want to be mindful of your font. You want your font to convey emotion because it does. The text always does convey emotion. You also want it to be readable. That's fonting 101. If it's not readable, then it's no good. Then your font choice was incorrect. No matter how well your font and whatever choice you've made goes with that emotion, if it's not readable, it's incorrect. So whatever you choose, it should be clear. And you can do that by, going back. Can you read it? How far back can you read it? Does it get mixed up, right? This font down here can be potentially hard to read. Both of them can be in the wrong situation if they're too jumbled, if the font's too small, if there's too much happening on the shirt with a graphic mixed in with this, some of this can get lost. So keeping that in mind as well, that the readability is more important than the emotion, but there's always emotion with font, and as you're designing and as you're thinking about it, as you're using text and font, think about the emotion that that particular font that you've chosen invokes, right? How does that make you feel? When you look at it, what does it make you think? What's the first thing that comes to mind? Does it match with whatever niche you're trying to put it for? Are you designing for motorcycles? Does this font up here, right? Does this look like something you would put in motorcycles? No. And it's always good to try a niche down. And so you could potentially do this if you have a good niche mixing. But this one, I wouldn't think about it as necessarily a good motorcycle font choice. So you probably need to choose something different depending on what you're doing. We talk about niching down, right? And so that it can also work, right? If you're trying to niche down, you're trying to find overlaps where you have the culmination of two niches coming together. Maybe it's people who love motorcycles that are also, really into vampires or whatever it is, in which case maybe this would work. But, always consider that. Your font, the text you choose, has emotion. Now, once you're selecting your font, there's a lot of tools, as I said, right? One quick easy way to see it is to, wrong one, go to if you ever are trying to edit the font, right, you do need to select the text tool. So these options will change up here depending on what you've selected. So if you're selecting the text tool, one easy thing, you can come here and, as I said, you can typically see what something will look like without having to select it. Likewise, you can select this, you can change the size of it. You don't have to go from here, right? I can type in whatever I want. So if I want to make this 350, which is going to be way too big, and hit enter, you can see that makes it big. If I want it back at 100, I can do the same thing. So you can manually type in this number here. I can change the color on the fly, right? If I want it here. Oh, no, it's gonna make me, oh, there it goes. I can also come up here and change, right, how it's bending. If I come up for arc, you can see what it does. Sometimes it gets a little wonky. Now the text, so mostly Photoshop works with what we call raster-based or pixel-based images. It deals with pixels. Text does not. And so you can manipulate text without causing it to pixelate. It's more vector-based. With all of these, there are some tools and things that you can do that's particularly distinctive photo editing, in which case you have to rasterize the text first. But, you have all of these options, right? And I'd encourage you to play with these too. Sometimes they're useful. You have all the sliders. So this isn't readable at all. I would never do that to this text. Looks interesting, but it's not readable, right? And you have the sliders to really change how it's looking. Sometimes they do weird things mid text here. Right, you can see the bending of it. So a lot of options with being able to manipulate the text. Now, like I said, there are certain things that you can do, like if you're trying to distress an image, you do have to rasterize the image first. So to rasterize your text, you can right-click it and then come up here and hit Rasterize Type. Now, when you do that, it converts the text into an image, and at that point it is pixel based. So when you manipulate it from there, it can blur. So if I go ahead and rasterize this, right, and then let's say I do something like warp it, right, as I manipulate this around, you can see it's blurring because it's no longer set that same way. So those edges will blur out. See down here, they're kind of blurred up just a bit. The more you can manipulate those, the more it'll blur. You can do it a little bit, but you lose the scalability when you rasterize it. But this history tool, very useful because I can just go right back to before it was rasterized, and voila, now it's manipulatable again with the text tools. So, you know, just a lot to play around with, a lot of potential options. You know, just something to consider as you're choosing a font, you're using type. Choose one that's valid for that emotion. And I wouldn't really do more than a couple of different font types in any particular image. Maybe up to 3, but if you're just sort of starting to think about it, I wouldn't do more than 2. And you can change the font if you're trying to emphasize something. Just like you can change the color on like one is a different color, and then you change the font and the color to something else if you're trying to emphasize a point on like a shirt or something else. But I wouldn't do that too much. I wouldn't have a ton of it because it starts getting jumbled and confusing, and you know, every font has an emotion, so you start jumbling up those emotions and what exactly you're trying to say. So I hope that's helpful. All right, so I hope that was helpful. Not only how to use the text tool in general in Photoshop, but thinking about font and the emotion that that particular text or font has. I hope that's also helpful. In the floating nether next to me, I have other videos of art tutorials I have done, and I will see you all soon. Thank you so much. Take care.